After 3 decades of military interventions and dominance, a convergence of anti-military forces, pro-democracy civil society organizations, determined Nigerian citizens, and international pressure groups would ensure that the dream of a democratic Nigeria was actualized to great hope and expectations of newfound freedoms and all the celebrated gains of self-rule. This achievement was probably the most consequential democratic experience of the Global South. A period of great global power peace gave rise to the growth of globalism and multilateralism, which fostered cooperation and strengthened the Anglo-American consensus of global governance. Nigeria would be a beneficiary of that new world order. Over 2 decades, the world has witnessed a stealth period of democratic recession, which to many was almost imperceptible. Democratic principles were slightly being remodified to the point where a critical re-examination is required as the underpinnings of our views on democratic institutions, rules, and ethos are being redefined most disruptively. The thought-provoking speech of Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, at the World Economic Forum in Davos recently, was the big bang that seems to have shaken us all out of our reverie and caused us to seriously interrogate what we knew democracy to be, as well as to honestly assess our preparedness for the emerging new world order. Ladies and gentlemen, management and board of Daily Trust, I'm truly honored to be a part of the assemblage of eminent individuals invited to interrogate the health of our democratic experiment. I should speak to the growing gaps between politics and governance today, which has become the defining challenge to Nigeria's Fourth Republic. Remaining optimistic, I shall try to challenge the doomsday quote by John Quincy Adams, the second president of the United States, which says, "Democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself." John F. Kennedy, the 35th president of the United States of America, says, and I quote, "Democracy is never a final achievement. It's a call to untiring effort." We are confronted with questionable electoral integrity, the proliferation of illiberal democracies and constitutional overreach in the African sub-region, the increasing incidence and popularity of military coups, as well as the security, stability, and prosperity of non-democratic countries such as China, Singapore, and the UAE increase our quandary. The superior qualities of democracy are under scrutiny. Will our untiring efforts in Nigeria, according to JFK, challenge the death prophecy, according to John Adams? Statistics from the Institute of Democracy and Electoral Assistance state that globally, 58% of adults are dissatisfied with democracy. In Nigeria, a significant and growing number, over 70%, are dissatisfied with how democracy actually functions in the country, seeing it as flawed or poorly implemented, and many believing elections don't reflect their views or remove bad leaders. Yes, Nigerians vote, but accountability remains weak. Institutions are not rules-based, public confidence in leadership is declining, and voter turnout has steadily dropped, reflecting growing political disillusionment. Voter turnout in Nigeria's presidential elections have declined sharply over recent years, from 52% in 1999 to 46% in 2015, and then 35% in 2019 to a dismal 26.7% in 2023, reflecting continued disengagement from their electoral process. Now on to the good news. Access to quality education, house care, housing and social protection remains uneven. Nigeria has one of the highest numbers of out-of-school children globally, estimated at 18 million. Health indicators lag behind peer countries. Social policies often react to crises rather than preventing them. Nigeria's population is young, energetic, and ambitious, yet grossly underutilized. When human potential is wasted, democratic hope weakens, brain drain and limited opportunities threaten long-term productivity. However, for the Fourth Republic, as highlighted by the speaker before me, it's not all gloom and doom. There are some highlights. With the GSM and ICT, and the democratization of information for new avenues for new wealth creation, our democracy has become more accountable by expanding citizens' opportunities to freedom of interrogation, expression, and association. Mobilization and organization for citizens' engagement to oppressive government policies became more effective and impactful. I can't think of a better example than the End SARS movement. Citizen advocacy is on the rise. People like Martins, also a very dark man, Precious, Mama P, lead the charge in that area, and their voices are loud and projected every day. Economically, digital content creators have brought immense value to the Nigerian economy, creating millions of jobs, exporting Nigeria's culture globally, and providing new avenues for socioeconomic expression. The creative industry in Nigeria's Fourth Republic, film, art, food, has grown from a largely informal sector to the country's second largest employer after agriculture. Nigeria's fashion and literary arts have contributed approximately 1.73 billion to the Nigerian economy. Everybody has spoken about an unbroken chain of transfer of democratic power through 8 cycles, from one ruling political party, the PDP, to a previously opposition coalition party, the APC, without interruptions, either by coups or extrajudicial changes. That should be cheery news. But is it? Unfortunately, democracy is not only about the ballot box. Democracy is not validated by longevity alone, it is validated by outcomes. Our democratic experiment raises its own credibility questions. The independence of the umpire, INEC, the shrinking of the political space, the heightened intolerance of any viable opposition, and the decline of multi-party political systems by the incessant defections. There are allegations that Nigeria dances dangerously on the brink of becoming a one-party state. The only challenge that rests on the belief that our diversity will prove such attempted monolithic control near impossible. But we shall wait and see. What is not working? The governability of our democracy is exposing huge gaps. To understand our strengths and failures, we must first query what is elections, what is governance, and why confusing the two has become costly. Elections is about winning power. It's a means to an end, while governance is about using power responsibly and effectively. Governance is long-term planning, it's institutional defense and growth, it is policy formation and implementation, it is service delivery, and it is most definitely accountability. While elections are episodic, governance is continuous. Elections ask who should lead, governance answers how society should be run. Elections creates authority, governance creates outcomes. The paradox of the Fourth Republic is that while politics is and continues to be extremely vibrant, our democracy is fragile, our governance is receding. Democracy simply appears unable to solve the country's major problems of rising widespread insecurity and eradication of multidimensional poverty, which, as Mr. Dari said, was inherited, but which seems to clearly have overwhelmed the leadership of the country, and I will highlight. Amidst declining public finance accountability and profligacy amongst us, the political class, according to the World Bank reports of 2025, over 75% of Nigerians live below the United Nations poverty threshold of $2 per day, translating to over 133 million people who are said to be living in multidimensional poverty, a steep rise from 87 million in 2018, with a new PricewaterhouseCoopers report projecting that 141 million people would have transmitted to the multidimensional poverty trap by the end of 2026. More disturbing statistics from NDIC confirmed by the Minister of Finance, Mr. Wale Edu, states that only 2% of the 70 million bank account holders have more than 500,000 naira, or the value of $350 in their accounts. Democracy, sadly, has clearly not translated to economic security. The quest for nation building and cohesion has proven to be a major challenge, with our fault lines magnified by our socioeconomic disparities. This polarization with its ethnic and religious leanings clearly predate the Fourth Republic, but has been exacerbated over time by vicious politics and entrenched inequalities. Partisan traditional media, distrust in institutions, and technological tools like social media and artificial intelligence spewing hate speech and violence, computational propaganda, deepfakes, and imagery. Nigerians today do not only speak about the traditionally perceived inequity between the North and the South of Nigeria. As we inch closely towards the election cycle, the recurrent North-South conversations are again beginning to rear their heads, but this time with a more divisive twist. For the first time, more people are beginning to engage in the micro-equity and the Southern contiguity conversations, probably as a result of the perceptions of skewed distribution of resources arising from the widely held touted beliefs that the Southwest benefits unfairly at the expense of other composite parts of the southern regions like the Southeast and the South-South. Our democracy obviously has not learned to walk the narrow corridors of creating a state strong enough to ensure stability amidst democratically guaranteed institutional reforms such as freedom of expression, even though we touted freedom of association. There is a joke that says you have freedom of expression, is what happens to you afterwards that there is no guarantee for. Repression has become increasingly fashionable, liberal populism seems to be on the rise, and the rule of law seems to be in retreat. Kabiesi, with the utmost respect, you spoke about gender inclusion, and I shall speak about gender inclusion. Unfortunately, our views differ ever so slightly. No honest assessment can ignore gender disparities in political and leadership representation. There is a Chinese saying that you can't hold up the sky with one hand. Nigeria has a historically low representation of women in political office, generally under 6%, and was ranked 139th out of 156 countries in gender equality matrix, with 14 women out of 360 members in the House of Representatives and only 4 females out of 109 senators. Nigeria falls significantly below the African regional average of roughly 23.4% and the global average of 26.1% for women in parliament. 15 out of 36 states in Nigeria operate their legislature with 0 female representation. When half the population is underrepresented in decision-making, development, and governance, outcomes inevitably suffer. This is not merely a gender issue, it is governance failure. Evidence consistently shows that societies that include women in leadership experience better social outcomes, stronger community trust, more sustainable development. A democracy that marginalizes women weakens itself. The period between 1999 and 2003 surpassed the prescribed 35% in appointive positions and witnessed women holding very strategic cabinet positions and delivering excellently on their mandate. The evidence is not abstract. Nigeria itself provides counterfactual. When Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala was appointed Minister of Finance, Nigeria was burdened by over 30 billion in external debt, with debt servicing consuming a crippling share of national revenue and crowding out spending on development. Through disciplined fiscal management, institutional reform, and one of the most complex sovereign negotiations in modern history, her leadership culminated in a landmark 18 billion debt relief deal with the Paris Club in 2005. That single outcome reduced Nigeria's debt stock by over 60%, freed billions of dollars annually for social infrastructure spending, restored international credibility to Nigeria's public finance system. This is not symbolic inclusion, it was measurable national gain. The lesson is clear that when Nigeria entrusted a woman with real authority over critical institutions, the result was not optics, it was outcomes. It was not propaganda, it was felt in our homes. Legislative interventions, such as the Special Seats Bill, which has been presented in the last three assemblies, the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th assemblies, have failed to get the desired legislative votes to achieve the affirmative action required to close the embarrassing gender gaps. The National Assembly will do well to seize this opportunity to etch its name glowingly in the annals of Nigeria's history by passing the Special Seats Bill to allow for more female participation in governance. Nigeria's development depends on it. On to the institutions. The Nigerian judiciary has a 21% approval rating. A new report by the Africa Polling Institute has found that 79% of Nigerians have little or no trust in the country's judiciary, citing concerns like political influence, inefficiency, delay in the judicial process, and erosion of integrity. Ironically, this appears to contrast sharply with known cases of bold judges who stood against authoritarian actions during the military era. Justice Nikki Toby, Justice of the Supreme Court of Blessed Memory, puts it succinctly, and I shall quote, "While politics as a profession is totally based on partiality, judgeship as a profession is fully and totally based on impartiality, the opposite of partiality. Their waters must never meet in the same way that rivers Niger and Benue meet at the conference in Lokoja. If they meet, the victim will be democracy. Most of the time, that will be bad for sovereign Nigeria. We need democracy, not despotism, oligarchy, and totalitarianism. Judges should on no account dance to the music played by politicians, because that will completely destroy their role as independent umpires in the judicial process. This, in my opinion, should be the new template for the judiciary in Nigeria's fledgling democracy. I see you're coming near me, but I must speak about the legislature. I will not leave until I do. I'm sorry, apologies. The legislature, the problems that confront the Nigerian legislature are tetra-headed. It battles weak legislative support systems and high attrition rate. The National Assembly records an average of 75% in legislators' turnover since the Fourth Republic. Consequently, there is no institutional memory. In 26 years, the legislature as an institution has struggled constantly to find its true relevance and independence in the tri-party spectre of democratic governance. The bastion of our democracy is the only institution in government that echoes the voice of the people. The duty of the legislature is to mitigate usurpation of authority and accumulation of power in one person. When performed optimally, it checks unilateral executive action. Between 2005 and 2006, an independent legislature voted against a constitutional amendment that sought to extend the tenure of an administration beyond the prescribed term limits. In 2010, the legislature invoked the controversial doctrine of necessity to proffer a political solution at a turbulent time in our nation's history. In the quest to entrench legislative independence, the National Assembly, in a well-publicized act of defiance with the chairman as the dramatis personae, unfortunately, I must call your name, resisted executive interference in the choice of the leadership and experienced probably the most vibrant assembly to date. This was a period that symbolize mutual respect, greater accountability, better representation, and more robust citizen participation. Those were the 7th and the 8th assemblies, and I'm proud to have been part of them. Sadly, the National Assembly seems to have yielded the hard-fought independence. There exists overraking executive dominance, probably as a result of interference in the emergence of the leadership of the 10th Assembly, which has earned them the unkind sobriquet from the Nigerian public, the rubber stamp assembly. The integrity of the National Assembly's actors and actions have never been called more to question, as recently when one of the core functions of the legislature, lawmaking, came under scrutiny amidst alleged distortions, inclusions, and forgeries, and someone or people or institutions acting ultra-virus posed assent of a critical piece of legislation, the Nigerian tax law. This, for the first time in our history, sadly calls to question the integrity of the laws that have been passed recently. With regards to oversight, another core function of the National Assembly, people question the inability to fund capital projects. The 3-year cumulative budget deficit exceeding 50 trillion naira. The 2026 fiscal deficit of 23.85 trillion naira and debt service obligations of 15.2 trillion naira, which exceed the combined budget allocation of defense and security at a time where our country is almost crippled by insecurity, education, and health budgets combined. People worry that the midterm expenditure framework and the Appropriation Act are blind to the details of the much-touted Lagos-Calabar coastal highway in spite of its staggering cost. Furthermore, Nigerians understandably are concerned about the leadership selection process, worry about the abuse of the confirmation powers of the executive positions in the Nigerian Senate. The National Assembly seems to have abandoned all pretense of neutrality, and the people question not only their performance, but their competence. In conclusion, without doubt, our country is exhibiting the warning signs of democratic fatigue. Voter apathy, youth disengagement, separatist tensions, and rising cynicism are warning signs. With more liberal voices silenced, we are confronted with the rise of populism and sycophantic allegiance to man, not state. The sad reality is highlighted by the fact that those who wish to push the very elastic limits of our democracy are weaponizing and deploying the very institutions that should uphold and sustain our democracy. The ardor starts to prove that democracy can still deliver better than any other alternatives depends on the critical shift from democracy as power acquisition to democracy as service and governance. We, the people, must be reminded that it is not only permissible to hold government to account, it is our duty. We must stop looking away from the fact that the Titanic of state has hit an iceberg. We must stop dancing to the loud music of elections and start to look to the lifeboats of governance. We all, the tripod of the elected, the citizens, and gatekeepers made up of media, civil society, and the judiciary, with the political parties, Mr. Chairman, sir, I'm talking to you, with the political parties acting as filters, must recommit to personal, institutional, and systemic reforms. We must unlearn the retrogressive habits and position our country to acquire new rules of governance that will help us survive and dominate the revolutionary change that is upon us. In the words of Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, he said, "If we're not on the table, then we are on the menu." We must breach the trust deficit between the elected and governed. We must demand transparency from the elected and resist the constitutional overreach of the executive. We must defend the integrity of strong state institutions. And finally, we must insist on a respected, impartial judicial system. A unified vision in our collective quest for security, good governance, prosperity, inclusiveness, and accountability must be the absolute barest minimum. Embracing our diversity is non-negotiable if we intend to build a prosperous nation in today's world. I thank you very much for listening.